And webinar is now streaming live on YouTube, so we will continue, and I'll continue calling those members who wish to speak during the main debate. I will give you a list of runners and riders just so you know roughly where you're likely to be. And that'll be, next will be Councillor Kerry Smith, then Robert Mitchell, then Councillor Alan Davis, then Councillor John Moran, then Councillor John Baker, Councillor Graham Butland, Councillor Pat Reid, Councillor Anne Terrell, Councillor Carla Guglielmi, and Councillor Alan Goggin, Councillor Jude Deakin, Councillor Stephen Robinson, Councillor Malcolm Buckley, and Councillors Spence, Bentley, Gooding and Walsh from the Cabinet have indicated, and whenever they wish, if they want to put their hands up, or at the end of this, then we'll press on. So we'll kick off with Councillor Kerry Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Did anyone watch Dispatches last night talking about how we paid the pandemic back as a country? And their key advice on there from economic experts was, you can't be taking money out of the economy now. The leader says it's not a council tax rise. Well, if I choose, or my constituents choose, not to pay the increase in adult social precept care, you'll get prosecuted for non-payment of council tax. So it is a council tax increase. As far as the law concerned, this is a council tax increase. Call it what you like, call it Bessie, Jude, Fred or Harry, it is a council tax increase. Now, we know the government was going to start the work to abolish all of the remaining county councils last autumn, and due to COVID, and understandably, that was put on hold. You have 65 million in day-to-day reserves. That's what you've got. What is more important now? Helping people who've got 80% of their income, thanks to the excellent furlough scheme. Can't criticise Boris for that. Great thing, it's helping people. But when you've lost a fifth of your income and the county council is saying to you, you're going to have to pay some more council tax. The Lib Dems saying pay less, about cutting £20 a week from people's benefits. £20. That's having such a drastic effect on local people on a low income through no fault of their own due to COVID. Because they can't get a job because the pubs and these other types of jobs have had to close for understandable reasons. No one's criticising that. So when you ask the Conservatives and Liberals for a council tax increase, that is kicking the lowest earning people who may not be on benefits either, where it hurts. Cannot be doing a council tax increase. And then we hear from both parties about all this eco-warrior stuff. Well, sorry, look at Texas. They put a lot of money into wind turbines, and didn't they work well during that snow blast? Didn't they work well? With the state having to step in and help people who've got $16,000 electricity bills because they're on variable energy charges. In Essex, we've seen Park Night Lighting to deal with so-called man-made climate change. If we look at the history of people on this planet, the climate has always changed. The sun has extra activity, the climate will change. What we drive, what we do, blah, 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 does diddly squat. Absolutely diddly squat. So again, taxing people at a time of economic stress, just for a theory, just for a feel-good factor, is a terrible thing to do. Because it's pushing those on the lowest incomes into further hardship and poverty. Those might be shaking their heads. Come to the food bank at Langdon. See the poverty there. You know, all this climate change ain't putting food in their belly. So I will be voting against all amendments and the administration's surcharge to tax people at a time when people don't have it. We're being abolished as an authority by the government. Great thing. So why don't you get off people's backs and use what we've got in reserves to keep council tax bills frozen and help people through these very tough times? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And it's a pity you can't be in a chair for a further year.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Right, we'll now move on to Councillor Robert Mitchell.
Thank you, Chairman. I wholeheartedly welcome the Leader's announcement of extra environmental funding. It's a good start, and I fear we'll be needing quite a lot more quite soon. Conveniently, I've already identified over £40 million that only residents can help us realise. As one of the Climate Action Commissioners, and having been involved in public waste for 40 years, I felt that for a change, I'd actually like to ask a few questions of our council taxpayers. Firstly, I fully appreciate that curbside waste collections of food and recycling do not serve every property. Each authority has different requirements and many flats have limited facilities, but collections are available for the significant majority of residents. In the following, please consider black bins and bags as vice versa. To set the scene, curbside collections of food waste are processed into compost, as well as biogas that fuels the processing plant. But analysis of black bin waste shows that food makes up over 25%, which costs us around £15 million a year in increased disposal costs, not to mention the CO2 emissions, when food is not put into the food waste bins. So question 1 is, would you like your local authority to continue collecting all food waste, but in the right containers? Or would you rather not bother and continue wasting cash and carbon by putting food waste in your black bags? For question 2, a short history may be useful, since from the early days of recycling 20 odd years ago, collection rates steadily crept up, driven by authorities expanding the service and conscientious residents who were happy to spend a few extra minutes each week to sort out their waste and do the right thing. Essex reached a very creditable recycling rate of around 55% in 2014-15, something like that, but there it plateaued, flat, nowhere near the 70+% that we should be able to reach.
2014.
2014, yes. Dry recyclables, that's the cans, tins, paper, card and plastics, make up another quarter of black bin contents. And the effective cost of those recyclates being put in the wrong bins is once again around £15 million every year. So do you put out your dry recycling fully in line with the local council's guidance? Or are you maybe of a misunderstood mindset that I pay my council tax so they can sort it out? Last but not least is the scourge of litter. And the question, I hope, is obvious. Would you like our local authorities to continue to spend another £15 million every year in picking up the litter that we see discarded in so many corners of our otherwise mostly green county? My final comment is a plea for our pockets and the planet. Could we do better by properly using the recycling systems that we already have in place, thereby freeing up the best part of £50 million for other initiatives and our environment? And I don't agree with Kerry Smith's other comments.
Well, thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Right, I'll now call Councillor Alan Davis. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chairman. I rise to support the Labour budget amendment, maybe not physically, but spiritually. Our amendment focuses on connections, two sorts of connections. Firstly, connecting with people in need of our help and assistance, whether that is a vulnerable family or young people. And secondly, providing well-maintained connections throughout our footway and highway structure. We would put £600,000 into our vulnerable families budget to help residents across the board, across all age ranges, are experiencing isolation and loneliness during these difficult times. It's important that we know where our most vulnerable residents are and deliver safe ways in which to help them during COVID and beyond. We will invest £200,000 in our youth service budget and provide 8 new jobs to commissioners with a goal of targeting young people most in need in our most deprived areas. Tackling mental health will be our priority as the pandemic has had an impact, putting a huge strain on many young people who are struggling daily with their mental health. Their daily lives have been massively disrupted by lack of school routines and seeing their friends. And older young people struggle to find jobs, and as Keir Starmer, our leader, said last week, on average 292 young people lose their jobs every day. It is vital that we step up and ensure that we are doing absolutely everything we can to help our young people during this crisis. Providing safe, well-maintained footways and highways is important to Labour. It's important to maintain the same standards across the county, whether that is Basildon or Malden. That's why we'll increase the footway maintenance budget by 1.8 million and keep the public rights of way budget in line with previous year's spending levels. During this COVID period, our residents are exercising more, taking walks and cycling, And we need to ensure that our pavements and rural routes are the best they can be. That is our goal. And when our roads are repaired, they need to be done to a high standard. So I'm sure we can all agree that an outside independent inspection of these repairs is a principled way forward, ensuring that checks and tests are performed, giving us assurance of good quality. So our budget helps both those that have been hit hard by the social effects of the pandemic, as well as prioritising our connected highway infrastructure. Labour has a positive vision, putting the priorities of the people first, because Labour is listening to the people of Essex. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. I'll now call Councillor Moran, John Moran. He did have problems with link up. We'll hope he's there.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've had a loss of power to the House, so it meant I've been listening to this debate on phone, and it's an interesting way to do it. I have to say that I thought the conversations from the Labour and Lib Dems didn't make any more sense on phone than they would on Zoom or in the full council. So I support fully the Conservative budget and oppose their amendments. It is often said that future performance is best gauged by past performance, and the past performance of the last 10 years by the Conservative administration here has been nothing other than spectacular. It's been efficient and effective. This upper tier authority is now seen as one of the best of its kind in the country. Top 3 in many areas, top 10 in all. And yet we have the Lib Dems criticising the fact that we are not raising council tax and seeming to ignore the fact that we've managed to keep it to a point where it's 40% below inflation over the last 10 years. Money is best left in residents' pockets, even if they choose to go into a public house and buy a packet of peanuts. That is best left in their pockets when it's appropriate. And on this occasion, particularly coming out of COVID, I feel strongly it is appropriate. And we have the Labour constantly saying they understand people better than we do. I think we understand residents just as well as they do, in fact, better. And when those residents open their council tax bill and see the zero, that will show that we understand where they are today, where they need to be over the next year. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Moran. Just to mention to Councillor Abbott, I've got him on the list to message through. Next, I'll call Councillor John Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm most grateful. I want to speak in support of the Liberal Democrat amendment to the budget with regard to providing financial support to Essex schools for children experiencing mental health difficulties. This amounts to the additional £2 million identified earlier by Councillor McCrory in his budget speech. Firstly, though, I want to acknowledge the current contribution officers have made through the Emotional Wellbeing and Mental Health Service, which provides advice and support for young people and their families. However, Mr. Chairman, it is now recognised that as many as 1 in 6 children, 1 in 6 children and young people across England are experiencing mental health difficulties as a result of the pandemic, lockdowns and fragmented and irregular schooling over the past year. This represents approximately 16% of the school population. In terms of a small primary school with 210 pupils, that is over a class full of children with mental health difficulties. For the many larger primary schools in Essex with 420 pupils or more, this is equivalent to over 2 classes of pupils, or roughly 70 children within every school of that size. I leave you and members to do the maths for secondary schools with over 100, with over 1,000 students. That's a sizable number of young people. What is more worrying, Mr. Chairman, is that there has been, and I'm quoting now, a significant increase in suicide rates in males aged 10 to 24 since 2017. That's from the Office for National Statistics. We know that a very small minority of young people sadly can and do take their own lives, which was unheard of when I was a teacher. We must, as a local authority, try to do all we can to stop this from happening and to enable our schools to provide professional counselling or other therapeutic support as appropriate when and where it is needed. Our budget amendment will go a long way to provide the financial support to do this in the 800 plus primary schools in Essex, 70 plus secondary schools and a smaller number of special and additional provisional schools across the county. I believe that to delay or do nothing is simply not an option. Therefore, I would urge members to support the Liberal Democrat amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Right, I'll now call on Councillor Graham Butland.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, the residents of the Braintree district have had two pieces of very good news in the last 18 hours. Last night, I presented the budget of Braintree District Council, which with no increase in things like car parking charges, no reductions in any services, we were able to announce no increase in council tax. Doing that, Chairman, we took account of the fact that Braintree District has had one of the highest number of furloughed workers in the whole of the county. And now, in our view, it is not the time to increase council tax. And I have to say, Chairman, that was supported by 42 of the 45 members present, including the Green, Independent and Labour members. We don't have any Liberal Democrats in Braintree, Chairman, and so I can understand how they are not aware of some of the difficulties that are facing residents in the district. And now this morning, we hear from Essex County Council and my old colleague, friend, and occasionally foe, Councillor Finch, announcing a similar situation for the Essex County. And let's be honest, it's a much bigger part of anyone's council tax bill. But again, really good news. We're also, I don't know whether he and I have had the same brains, but last night, as part of our budget, we also announced a reserve, an earmarked reserve of £500,000 for taking forward our climate change strategy. And now this morning we have further resources going into that from the County Council. I hope that both Braintree District Council and Essex County Council will work together to ensure that we can get the biggest payback for that investment. I think this is a very good budget. It takes account of the fact that many of our constituents have had an extremely difficult time this year. Many have lost loved ones as part of the pandemic. Many have suffered extreme financial hardship, helped to in no small part, however, by the generosity of the Conservative government. And I think we also need to accept that local government has received significant resources from central government. Central government, Chairman, needs to accept that local government has stood up to the mark and provided excellent help and support throughout this period. I think this is a very good budget and I will be wholeheartedly supporting it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Butland. Councillor Pat Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Labour amendment is asking for an increase of £600,000 in the budget on a one-off basis to support the community to assist with isolation and loneliness, and also asking for an increase of £200,000 to provide a further 8 commissioners to the youth service for 12 months to help to support the additional demand in the most deprived areas within Essex. It is impossible to ignore the impact that COVID-19 is having on the mental health of our young people, their families and on communities. Many children are incredibly resilient, adopting to homeschooling and finding different ways of engaging with family and friends. But recent NHS figures suggest that the number of children referred to child and adolescent mental health services is up 20% from 2019. These young people have missed the chance to socialise, and they have missed out on playtime with their friends, things that we all know are extremely important to encourage self-confidence and self-esteem early in their lives, to enable them to progress in much needed life skills. They can catch up with maths and English later. In Scandinavia, children start their school life much later. Academically, they achieve the same standard as our young people. Councils have a key role to play as guardians of mental health and well-being in their communities. We need to rise to the challenge of promoting good mental health and preventing poor mental health. We must consider how best to maximise the learning and the innovation that has happened because of COVID-19. County Council will need a big programme of support for these young people to undo some of the damage that this pandemic has created. Teachers will be able to track the COVID children in 2 or 3 years' time based on their attitude, behaviour and learning. We need to ensure that all libraries in Essex remain open so they can provide much needed facilities across the board for all age groups. And in Basildon, we have the exciting project of building a youth zone, which will complement our other youth facilities and enable young people from 8 to 19 years of age to use a state-of-the-art facility, which will help our children to recover from the pandemic and improve their social skills, their mental health and their well-being. We as a county need to be proactive, not stand still. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. I'll now call on Councillor Anne Terrell.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, I'd also like to thank you for the way you've chaired full council meetings, particularly in these difficult times. I shall miss it. I obviously support the Liberal Democrat budget amendment because it concentrates on issues that the residents are most concerned about. And we learnt this from the consultation carried out by Essex County Council. Part of the increase we propose will be allocated to council tax relief, which is distributed by borough, district and city councils to help those who struggle to pay council tax. Oh, excuse me, sorry. Residents were asked quite a few questions, but one of the questions they were asked was, what do you think most needs improving in your local area? 72% was road and pavement repairs. I think many councils have mentioned this already, but I'm going to say it anyway. In our amendment, we are focusing on pavement and cycleways and surface water repairs. In my division, I received more complaints about the state of pavements and cycle paths and roads. We want to encourage more walking and cycling, then our pedestrian paths and cycle paths need to be brought up to a better standard. We also need to reduce surface water from the paths in Essex, along with better paths, which will help healthier ways to do shorter journeys, walking and cycling. Picking up on something somebody mentioned just now, they said when residents open up their council tax, they will see zero. They will not see zero, they will see 1.5% rise. And finally, the administration's budget, I'll say a few words about that. In a responsible budget, it's not balanced, or it's balanced by 46 million of cuts, not identified. So we have no idea what is going to be cut next year, or for next year, to cover this budget, to make this budget balance. We have previously asked for more detail on the £46 million cuts, but we've only just been given a list with no detail. Most of it seems to be coming from adult social care. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, we'll now call, I'll just run down. We've got Councillor Gilbert, Councillor Deakin, Councillor Robertson, Councillor Buckley and Councillor Abbott. Then I have Councillor Spence, Councillor Bentley, Councillor Gooding and Councillor Walsh indicated. Just to let you know what the running order is. Councillor Guglielmi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I would also like to congratulate the leader and the cabinet member for finance for a most excellent budget proposal, which I will of course be supporting. If anyone ever wanted an example of what rewards good housekeeping, strong financial management bring about, then just look at what we've got in front of us. I'm delighted that once again, £500,000 has been allocated to the Violence and Vulnerability Unit through the Office of the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner to continue its work to tackle county lines and support young vulnerable people from criminal exploitation. At the beginning of February, in 2 weeks operation, 44 criminals were charged in Colchester, Chelmsford, Southend and London, and county lands taken out of Clacton, Chelmsford, Braintree and Whittam. Our total investment so far of 1.5 million has played a great part in achieving this. I particularly welcome the news of an educational task force for those areas in Essex in need of support following the impact of the pandemic. Sadly, one of those areas in great need is tendering. As we learned a couple of weeks ago, this council has already set up a multidisciplinary team to support education, domestic abuse, drug and alcohol and mental health issues. This task force will go a long way to improve some of those people's educational attainments, especially when you consider the free IT devices Councillor Louise McInley's team has so far distributed to our tendering school. And finally, Mr. Chairman, I would like to pay homage to the leader, continuing the locality fund for a great scheme. Talking of education, allocating money to Mr. Norman Primary School, who completely replaced their failing IT system and can move forward in a much more positive way. And I'm sure every member of this council has benefited in finding a good use for their share. Councillor Finch and Councillor Whitbread deserve a massive praise for such an excellent budget. We'll go a long way to address some of the issues we face in Essex. Let's never forget that only a few years ago, just before the Conservative and when they eventually took over, this council had barely enough money left to last out a week. Finish my speech, Mr. Chairman, by offering my own personal thanks to Councillor David Finch for the tremendous help and support he and this council gave in securing a landmark victory in the Supreme Court for the village green on Mistley Quay. Thank you, David, for all you've done for Mistley, and most important, for all you've done for the people of Essex and the way in which you have led this authority through some incredibly challenging times. We'll all miss you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Gilbert. You were slightly premature, perhaps. Councillor Goggin, you were rather worried that I didn't put you on the list, but I'm sure I didn't miss you. How could I? The tendering contingent. So, Councillor Goggin.
Chairman, good morning and welcome from sunny Brightlingsea, where it is absolutely glorious day. And it's made even better by the great pleasure that I have in proposing the budget as circulated, and might I add, introduced in an unbelievably professional and efficient manner. It's the best speech I've heard in many, many years, in many, many chambers from many, many people. Congratulations. The budget speech also gives me the opportunity to refer to various parts of the education and skills portfolio where I have the privilege of working. It's also an opportunity for me and others to pay tribute to the teaching and education family. This includes teachers, teaching assistants, general staff, who together with all of the Essex County Council officers involved in education have performed fantastically for many years, but who have exceeded any possible expectation during the last 12 months of this COVID dreadful time. We have a situation in Essex where we have 600 plus schools and settings, we have 200,000 plus pupils, and we have 13,000 staff. Equally, we are proud to say that 90% of our schools are rated as good or outstanding. The proposed spend of for 21-22, with a revenue spend of 1.2 billion and a capital spend of 60 million, includes substantial increases, and as you will see from the Essex budget, is one of the largest set of numbers on there. And this is absolutely correct. The future of our country and our county is very much in the hands of our children, and it's only right and proper that Essex County Council should strive to provide the best possible education and the opportunity for children to be the best they can be. As such, I believe it's important that the buildings where they learn and where others work are as good as they can be. I'm pleased to highlight that the capital expenditure has increased from 48 million to 60 million. I'm also pleased to confirm that 5 million is to be allocated to replacing aged classrooms. This, together with the new builds and all the works, will provide buildings which provide a net carbon zero, and thus complying with Essex County Council policies. I represent Brightlingsea, and I can assure you the park night lighting we have in Brightlingsea is very well received. It's seen as a very sensible move that saves money and is great for the environment. Members, I urge all members to support this excellent, first-class, efficient, professional budget.
Thank you, Councillor Godwin. You're so honoured to be so close to Merseyside, of course. Right, we'll now move on to Councillor Jude Deakin.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. As my colleagues have said earlier, this Conservative budget is irresponsible, with £46 million of unidentified cuts. When will Essex residents discover exactly what services will be cut and by how much? Liberal Democrats are proposing an additional £2 million to the Children and Families budget and a further £500,000 to the Youth Service budget to provide additional support for the young people of Essex. We believe no young person should be neglected or feel unsafe, and that all young people deserve the services and support they need in their journey into adulthood. There are many suffering trauma, and the lack of mental health provision in the community is a further significant hurdle for many young people in accessing the help that they need. The YMCA's Back on Track report of August 2020 found that 57% of young people felt that their mental health had worsened during lockdown, and 77% feeling lonelier and more isolated. This is on top of the recent findings from NHS Digital, which cite that 1 in 6 children aged 5 to 16 now identified as having a probable mental disorder, an increase from 1 in 9 just 3 years ago. After suffering such disruption during their formative years, it is more important than ever for young people to have access to services and safe spaces for their personal, social, and emotional development outside of their home or school. This government pledged £500 million of funding for youth services over a year ago, yet next to nothing has been spent. This, alongside the fact that local authority expenditure on youth services has been cut by 73% in real terms since 2010-11. The need for this support for young people has never been more urgent. The youth service is a key element in young people's recovery, both now and into the future. And it is crucial that funding delivers on what young people so desperately need. Can we, hand on heart, say that we have really looked after our young carers? Have we been offering mentoring, respite and supporting their needs throughout this pandemic? For some, maybe, but not all. This additional money will allow for our skilled professional youth and detached workers to make a real difference to the disconnected youngsters. Denise Hatton, Chief Executive of YMCA England and Wales, said, "With the right funding and strategic planning, youth services can be utilised to carefully and positively build young people's confidence and prepare them for the future, ensuring that they are not left further behind. This is why we are proposing additional funding to support our young people, and I ask you to support the Liberal Democrat amendment." Thank you.
Councillor McKinley, I've got you on the list. I'm not going to call you now, but I have definitely got you on the list. Councillor Stephen Robinson.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I want to make a couple of points about the main budget and a couple on the Lib Dem amendment. As regards the overall budget, as has been mentioned, this includes £46 million of cuts which are not identified, and even the budget report admits that at least a third of those cuts are one-off, and therefore something else will have to be found in next year. The budget report also makes clear that debt charges for servicing the capital programme are rising from 7% of revenue to 11% of revenue in a couple of years' time, this is becoming unsustainable and will be a drag on the revenue programme. And finally, the County Council Conservative Group has ignored their own public consultation, where people said they would be willing to pay a small rise in council tax in order to protect vital services. And so that's where the Liberal Democrat amendment comes from. The Lib Dem amendment talks about real action on climate change, which is the greatest threat to our current way of life. When it snows in Texas, you know that climate change is a real problem. And secondly, the specific proposals include support for mental health, which, as Councillor Wood and others have mentioned, has seen a real increase, particularly amongst young people over the last year, if not longer. And footway maintenance. We've all got residents in our own wards who complain about the failure to repair pavements enough. And finally, the key element of this Lib Dem amendment is additional funds to protect those families on low incomes from the rise in council tax, using existing systems that are in place to support those families. So the Conservatives are irresponsible with lining up cuts, but they won't tell us where they're coming from. And the Liberal Democrat amendment proposes to listen to the priorities of the people of Essex and propose some significant amendments to that. And that's why I'm supporting it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Councillor Malcolm Buckley.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. This is the 8th budget that I've sat through at County Hall as a member. They've all had one common theme: sound management, financial stability, and they've all brought forward new investments. But not only that, this year the budget has been seriously tested. The ability to cope with what we didn't know about a year ago, and one only has to look at the pandemic for that. But looking forward, it won't just be the pandemic, it will be the effects of the pandemic. As mentioned earlier by some members about mental health, for example, becoming a problem. There will be many other things that we don't know about yet that will have an impact on the way that we can actually deliver our services and what investment we need to deliver those services. But there is good news there as well. The support for the police is very welcome, and I know residents in my division will be very pleased to hear of the work being done on county lines in particular. Investment in highways, yeah, great news. There's still a lot more to do, and I will be bending Councillor Bentley's ear rather more about that again in the future, I'm certain. But there has actually been some very positive news come from highways. Within my division, we're going out to tender for a replacement bridge, which has been causing problems for residents. We've got the Emergency Active Travel Fund, which is promoting a scheme, which I'm glad to say I've been involved with, which is to enhance the use of cycles and pedestrians for travelling around. That is something that's coming forward. And of course, the extra money for the LHPs, I think, will be welcomed by members across the county. And I'm very pleased again to hear about the extension of the locality fund, and Councillor Ball and I, who are joint members of the same division, have supported a number of local causes, from cycle racks at a school to a bowls club to Village Green, and it's been very well received, so I'm very glad that that's happening. So far as the opposition are concerned, we just had the usual tweaks. There's always a little bit of a tweak to reserves, we expect that from them. But I was quite astounded by Councillor Henderson's comment about we should be using more of the waste reserve, because those of us that understand a little bit about what's going on there with the PFI, with the legal proceedings over the waste plant and so on, will recognise why that waste reserve has to be kept. And it would be irresponsible to think about dramatically reducing it as he implied. The Liberals, at least, have got the courage to say that they would put the council tax up. I disagree with that, and I would an amendment. And if I may just finish off, they said only a few pence more. Tell that to somebody who's at a food bank or on free school meals. We've delivered 6 out of the 10 last year's zero tax increase. Let's make that trend continue under the next administration after May's elections. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Our last speaker other than Cabinet members is Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, that's fine.
Thank you. I recognise the work and commitment of Essex County Council in supporting residents and communities through this dreadful COVID pandemic. And I also would join with other members in recognising the dedication of Councillor Finch over many years. I've known David since he was a branch district councillor over 20 years ago. And politics aside, that is many years of dedication. Government financial support has been vital in keeping councils like Essex County Council going, but as others have said, the financial pressures exist and we really haven't moved forward from the pre-pandemic situation where the papers today indicate still growing pressure on the budget in the coming years, described as a budget gap, but actually we're looking at cuts to services and increasing borrowing. This is not sustainable in the long run. I welcome the green initiatives, including the Climate Change Commission, of which I'm a member, and the Essex Forest Initiative. However, as I have said in previous years, balance of funding remains skewed to business as usual. For example, the money for cycling in the budget is less than £1 million compared to multi-million pound sums for many roads. Essex can and should have an integrated walking and cycling network connecting towns and villages, and which would open up opportunities for modal shift, better health and reduction in road traffic, rather than simply planning for ever more road traffic. Even through this dreadful COVID pandemic, the budget consultation identified the environment and climate change as the second highest priority. Now, whilst the administration may think it's doing a great job on highway maintenance, as many councillors have said, we and residents often see things very differently. The current highways maintenance system simply does not work properly. It doesn't identify or deal with defects on a safety basis as it should do. And the example I have sent repeatedly, 5 times in fact, to ECC about the enormous pothole in Collingwood Road, Witham, is an example of that. ECC should have a back to basics approach where they don't leave significant defects on roads and footways for months, and they repair clusters in an efficient way and respond better to reports. The budget consultation also identified road and pavement repairs as the top local priority for local residents. We're also now seeing significant surface flooding each winter and in the same places. And contrary to what's been said about climate change, that's a direct result of climate change. Wetter winters in the UK was predicted. Back to basics would also mean that Essex County Council concentrates on prevention, keeping gullies and drainage pipes clear, improving capacity and clamping down on private landowners who discharge water onto footways and roads and cause the problems. As the long-running saying goes, a stitch in time saves 9. On recycling, the waste review should not be used to cut services such as recycling centres, and we need to increase recycling to the much higher levels. And as Councillor Mitchell said, we could be getting towards 70%. In concluding, Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to welcome some of the announcements today on increased funding, particularly for the LHPs, which has been a long time coming, but is very welcome. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Right, we now move on to Cabinet members who've indicated, and in the running order that I've got, they're Councillor Spence, Councillor Bentley, Councillor Goodin, Councillor Walsh and Councillor McKinney. Councillor Spence.
Well, thank you, Chairman. And I genuinely am grateful to the colleagues from the opposition benches for their interest in issues around loneliness and social isolation and the mental health of our young people. Though, to be honest, I'm a bit frustrated. The Essex Health and Wellbeing Board is a statutory board of this council, open to the public, and where I will always enable councillors to participate. Had any of those councillors attended the last meeting, they would have found the last 2 meetings, they would have found lengthy debates around the issues of loneliness and social isolation, with all the expertise in the room, and which identified not money as the source of the challenge, but the fact that many of the existing resources around social prescribing, community agents and so on have had to be diverted during the COVID crisis. At no point in those conversations, with the voluntary sector participating, did anyone say to me that more money was required to solve this? Far from it. It is much more about the unfracturing of the world in which we live. But I'd like to offer, Mr. Chairman, that if the Labour group would like to actually quantify what they'd like to do with their funds and give me a business case, I shall be very happy to debate it with them. And if it is the right thing to do and I can see the value for money for the residents of Essex, find a way to fund it out of a budget, which I would remind you in gross terms is around £600 million. Turning to mental illness, I absolutely agree, and I think every councillor in the chamber would agree with the importance of the mental health of our young people and the ways in which they will have been scarred during lockdown. And again, I would say the Essex Health and Wellbeing Board has discussed it fully over recent months and is dedicating most of its meeting in May to the same topic. But councillors are forgetting that the clinical treatment of mental illness is a National Health Service responsibility. The agreements that we have are jointly commissioned with the National Health Service, and we cannot simply go and punt some money in there and expect it to be solved. What we can do is stay very close to our voluntary providers, and I will be having another meeting with the Chief Executive of one of the major charities in Essex only tomorrow. What we can do is try to tackle the problem in the nip it in the bud, which is why among the funds that the chairman, that the leader announced this morning, some will be used to do a further round of training for schools, for teachers, for learning assistants et al, around helping them identify early signs of mental illness so that those young people can be immediately referred. And this council has my assurance that if people come and talk to us about the need for more resource in this area, then we will find ways to do that. That will be another key task of the Education Task Force. And Chairman, I'm frustrated because much has been said by Councillor Henderson about trust. He complained that we had increased the charges for people accepting our care, but they have been driven by our desire to increase in line with the living wage and thus ensure that everybody gets a good rate of pay. At the last council meeting, the leaders, the Liberal and Labour groups actually argued that we should be increasing the pay of social care workers across the county, both those that work with us and work for us, in order that they could earn more. But nowhere in this budget amendment today is that increase showing. And we would have needed a much more significant increase to fund that. So, Mr. Chairman, I wonder what the social care sector of Essex trust in groups that propose something at one meeting and ignore it at the next. What I'm very concerned is we look after their mental welfare, hence the Here For You programme that the leader announced. And finally, Chairman, it was alleged that there are 46 million of cuts in this budget. There are not. What I will tell you all is that there will be no cuts in the adult social care budget. What there will be is the search for win-wins. Why would we not, for instance, celebrate that with our Connect programme, we will enable more people to live at home, happy, independent lives, but that will save money? Why would we not celebrate that we're working to get more people with learning disabilities into paid employment, giving them better, more meaningful lives, and by the way, saving money? Chairman, this is a budget not about cuts, it is a budget about investing in people to let them have better lives. And sure, it gives savings as well. That's why it's a win-win for this council and for the residents of Essex alike.
Thank you, Councillor Spence. Right, I'll now call on Councillor Bentley.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to speak to the two amendments as a Cabinet member. Before I do that, I'd also like to pay tribute to Councillor David Finch, my leader, who I've sat next to more often than not. We can't at the moment while he's delivered budget speeches, and I think I agree that is the best, and he's delivered some really good ones over the years. It's really fantastic. And I'd like to also make sure we praise Councillor his first budget as a Cabinet member, and he's delivered this as well. Great work by Councillor Whitbread and his team behind him. And indeed, Mr. Chairman, this is your last meeting in the chair, and can I also thank you for the way you've conducted it, both in person and over Zoom. Not an easy thing to do with so many people on the call as well, and you've done it with great grace and great humour. Thank you. On to the amendments. So for me, having read them very carefully, because a lot of them mention my portfolio a lot, and you've heard that being mentioned during the course of this debate. But for me, the two amendments, both by the Liberal Democrats and Labour, are a muddle of extra borrowing, which of course puts pressures on our revenue account by increased interest rates we have to pay. And council tax rises as well, right now at a time when many people, certainly in the private sector, are facing very bad times, don't know if they have jobs after furlough, haven't got jobs already, that they should want us to increase council tax, I think is absolutely wrong. And that's why we haven't done it. Now, there is the adult social care of 1.5%, but I think we all understand that's going to help, as you've just heard from Councillor Spence, some of the most vulnerable people in our society. And I think that is fair and equitable, but not to increase the council tax on top of that as well. Looking at the Liberal Democrat amendment in particular, and I think they are very confused. If you look at 1.1 of their amendment, and then the fourth dot of that, at the very end, it talks about introducing clean air zones. Yet in Epping Forest, the Liberal Democrats are campaigning against a clean air zone. So have they not had a conversation with their colleagues? It's very confusing. I can only imagine Councillor Whitbread, as leader of Epping Forest Council, will be sending a copy of this to the Epping Forest Liberal Democrats saying, have you read this? This is your policy, apparently. You can't have it both ways, can you really? And then to both on Labour and on Liberal Democrats, they rightly praise those in public service, those who work in the public service sector, quite rightly so. Yet it doesn't appear to apply to those who work on highways, those crews who go out there on a daily basis, in all weathers, and then get in the gritting lorries and do the great work when we're asleep, keeping our roads safe. That doesn't count, because all you do is criticise them continually for their work. We have just gone through one of the worst winters in decades. We've had floods, lots and lots of rain, lots and lots of rain. Then we've had snow, then we've had ice. By the way, those guys are out there delivering the gritting while that's happening. And yes, they are repairing. You can't repair when it's pouring with rain all the time, but they go out and the weather has an effect on those make-safes. They're the ones that come out, not the permanent repairs, the make-safes. And those guys have gone out, they've gone out again to keep those roads safe. And I think it's just appalling. The way the opposition parties keep attacking those crews is terrible. Don't forget, those crews are also voters in Essex. They've heard you, and they understand what you believe. When it comes to these amendments, on both of them, what I really don't understand is you're tinkering around. Yes, these amounts are very large to all of us as individuals, but as a collective, as you heard Councillor Spence say, multi-million-pound budgets, these are simply drops in the ocean, and they're not going to achieve what you want. It looks good on paper, but it won't achieve it in the way we have. Our teams are out there day after day after day. And as the weather gets better, you'll see them. More crews going out because of the extra money we have from government, but also the extra money we put in as Essex County Council, this vast county with a huge road network of nearly 5,000 miles. It stretches from Chelmsford to New York if you spread it out. And by the way, Councillor Henderson, I absolutely have taken my hand off the wheel because I believe in sustainable transport. I use my car less. Again, a bit of preaching, but not much practicing going on by the Socialists and the Liberal Democrats there. So get out your cars more, use sustainable transport more, walk and cycle on those great cycling ways we've created. E-scooters when you get the chance as well, all part of the Conservative plan to make sure all forms of transport work in this county. Mr. Chairman, for me, this is a budget for recovery from this awful pandemic. To help boost our economy, support families and children, help repair more roads and protect the environment, increase education benefits and help mental health issues, and protect the most vulnerable in our county. This is a sensible, viable and pragmatic budget, an inspirational budget and a budget for optimism. It's a Conservative budget, Mr. Chairman, and a budget that ensures Essex bounces back from COVID.
Thank you, Councillor Bentley. Councillor Gooding.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'd also like to give you my congratulations on your excellent tenure in the chair. I think you've kept everybody in order incredibly well, and I think that's no mean task on some occasions. I have to say that I have a slight feeling of deja vu in making these comments, because I seem to recall that every year the opposition parties in the budget speeches offer me more money for youth services. I always like to be offered more money, but actually I'll say again this year, as I've said in all of those previous years, I think I've got what I need. And, you know, I was very impressed with Councillor Pond's little analogy about manicuring the holly bush with nail scissors. And I think that's really what these amendments amount to. We have to remember that we've proposed an education task force with some significant funding behind it, which will absolutely be looking into and using the resources of youth services and all sorts of other parts, Active Essex and everything that goes into that. We've also got funding for mental health care coming forward. And we've also got funding going to the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner again to tackle the issues around county lines. Very important thing. We can't separate those. They're all part of the same. And so I think just going on to comment briefly about the two amendments. The Labour one, I'm really pleased to see that they've realised that people and staff are more important than buildings and white elephants that cost multi-million pounds and don't address what's needed. That's pleasing. However, 200,000 for 8 people, is that a part-time job or are they on less than minimum wage? I wonder how on earth that could balance. So I think I can't support that, obviously. The Lib Dem amendment, again, a rather better amount of funding offered. But again, it's money that we've already got available. It's things that we're already doing. So why do we need to put more without any understanding of what it's going to purchase? So again, I don't think I can support that. I have to say that we are all concerned about the issues around mental health in young people, but actually one of the real benefits that will come from the task force and all of the things that are attributed to that is the understanding that many of these mental health issues exist not just within the young people themselves, but in the families in which they live. And I know that in conjunction with Councillor Spence, there will be means to address those issues. Very important. We need to understand the entirety of the problem, not just the symptoms. We can't just throw money at the symptoms in these things. So in relation to that, I have to say we will have the £100,000 available for youth services this year. I think there's some really good schemes being put forward in tendering and in other places. I was rather disappointed that take up was later than it could have been. Actually, in many cases, from the people who were campaigning for it the loudest. But I doubt my thanks to the efforts that have been made in some parts of the council. So that will go forward again this year. I would like to commend the budget. I will certainly be supporting the Conservative budget, which I think addresses the very issues that we're all concerned about, but I won't be supporting either of the amendments because I think, as I quoted before, they are trimming the holly bush with nail scissors. And so thank you, Mr. Chairman, but I would like to support the Conservative budget.
Thank you, Councillor. Right, we'll now go to Councillor Walsh.
Grateful, Chairman, and again, can I praise your chairmanship, but not just in the chair, but out visiting too. And we had a very good day out, I seem to recall, in Linsell, where you unveiled the village sign for them, and that went down extremely well. Right, the sign's still up. So I'd like to speak to the Lib Dem amendment, please, and let me just say that I cannot support it. Clearly, climate change is an important issue, and I must say I'm slightly astounded we have at least one climate denier in the chamber, the virtual chamber, who seem to believe it's not happening at all in Councillor Smith. But I think the Lib Dem amendment is not only premature because it kind of pre-guesses what might be the output, the final output from the Climate Commission's work, which we'll hear about in the summer, but also a bit late. You heard me talk about what we've done for flood prevention. That's some 6 years of work already underway. But can I reassure members that my very experienced and expert team of officers are extremely talented in winning external funding. In the past 12 months, they've won nearly £8 million worth of funding to support climate change activities across the piece, supporting businesses, engaging with those who build homes and other structures to go for low energy buildings, helping 100 low income fuel poor households get insulation, so they have to spend less to keep warm. A whole range of things. I'm more than happy to share these with you. And of course, we have the first electric car forecourt in the UK, if not the world, in Braintree. A really good piece of work, and that actually was part of a £5 million successful bid. So we're not sitting on our hands, we're really moving forward and looking at those bullet points. We're there, we're doing it. Tree planting, absolutely brilliant. We've exceeded our 25,000 planned plants this year by many, many thousands. 36,000, I reckon we're planting this season, with Countryside Stewardship Grant supporting it and 12,000 trees gifted by the Woodland Trust. Brilliant, brilliant story. If I can move on to the fly tipping piece. Firstly, can I thank Councillor Mitchell for his comments around recycling and others. I think it's absolutely important we keep the pressure on. And of course, if we can get that waste into the appropriate waste streams, it does reduce to a degree the fly tipping problems that we do encounter from time to time. But to be quite frank, if we are to tackle fly tipping properly, we need to nip it in the bud, so it's not leaving the households, entering into the waste stream via dodgy tradespeople. We need to actually stop it at the beginning. So we have worked, and I chair the Essex Rural Partnership. We did a really good piece of work on bringing all the agencies together. So the Environment Agency, local authorities, and the police. And I can say that a number of prosecutions have been taken up, which is really encouraging stuff. I'm also pleased to say that Roger Hurst has agreed to take this on in terms of chairing it through his office as Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner. But finally on this, there is talk of us as a county council taking on the prosecution role of fly tippers. This really isn't our role. And I'm surprised this has come from district councillors who also sit on this council, that they should know that it's their city council run by Lib Dems that are there to prosecute fly tippers. So really it is an absurdity. In fact, to be quite frank, their whole amendment is an absurdity, and I will reinforce the point I said earlier, I'm not prepared to support it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. Councillor Louise McKinley.
Thank you, Chairman. I wanted to respond to some of the comments that have been made in regards to the support for children and young people, because as has rightly been said, cross-party, the impact of the pandemic we know is going to be profound, particularly in some of our more deprived communities. So it's with that in mind that we need to consider how we're going to address those issues and how we're going to support young people into the future. And because of its complexity, it's so important that we do this in a strategic and rounded way. So the £1 million which has been announced today for additional support for mental health is obviously very welcomed and is crucial, but it's only one aspect of all that we're doing and all that we need to do. It's absolutely vital that we look at this at a grassroots level. So if you look at the support that we've given young people and their families during the last 12 months, from additional money for food banks, to holiday schemes, to the provision of laptops to ensure that those families who would otherwise go without can have access to continue with their education. The announcements that my colleague Councillor Ball has made over the last few months about apprenticeships and investment in local businesses, and the support that we've seen from our youth services who have been incredible during these periods of lockdown. And I'd like to pay tribute to them and to our social workers who have gone out and visited the most vulnerable families in the most difficult of times, making sure that those young people are supported, are visited, and that we can ensure their safety and that we can support those families as we need to. Our foster carers, an incredible 57 have been recruited during lockdown, and that's something which I think we should be incredibly proud of, and which is testament to the hard work and commitment of our staff to continue to make the case to get more foster carers on board. And Chairman, all of this comes together to provide that rounded package of support for young people. The targeted support, which I've announced a couple of weeks ago as well in the tendering area, where we're going to be committing just under £600,000 to support those deprived communities, where we're going to look at multidisciplinary teams, providing additional resources to help break the cycle, to tackle the so-called toxic trio, mental health, addiction, domestic abuse. It's about all of these different components that we need to bring together to make sure that we are in a place to support our young people, not just here and now in these times of difficulty, but into the future, because the impact of this can and will be felt. So everything that I spoke about earlier in terms of the summer camps, they are just the start. I explained in my response to the verbal question earlier at the importance of that extracurricular and co-curricular opportunities. And that's something that's going to be at the very forefront of all that we are doing. So Chairman, it is about bringing this whole piece together, making sure that we're not just working in silo or that we're coming up with just one aspect where we think we can actually help young people, that it's actually all of these parts interwoven together, and for us to be really ambitious about what we can achieve and what we want our young people in Essex to achieve. And that's going to be the mantra that we're going to continue to support and champion as we go forwards.
Now, I have had a hand up from Councillor McCrory, who has already spoken. This either has to be a point of order or he has to perhaps pass to Councillor Kendall. So it's or a point of personal explanation. Councillor McCrory, you know, it's a little out of order, but have you got an explanation for it?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a point of personal explanation. It's my understanding that if a flight dipping occurs on the highway, it is the Essex County Council Highway Authority's responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCrory. I'm sure that will be explained. Right, so I'll take your hand down. Now, that is the list of speakers. I'm now moving on to the seconders of the motions. What I'm going to do is I'm going to wind up this debate before we have a break. So it may be a little bit longer than we thought. So if I could ask Councillor David Kendall, the seconder of the Liberal Democrat amendment, to sum up 3 minutes if you haven't already spoken, so it's 3 minutes. Councillor Kendall.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. I'm very pleased to be able to second the Liberal Democrat amendment to the budget. As has been said, the members of the Liberal Democrat group have taken on board the issues raised by residents in the budget consultation, the county's budget consultation, and we've based our amendment on those findings. We've also moved this amendment because we believe the administration's budget before us today needs to deliver far more support in many key areas. Now, over the last 11 months, many of our residents have suffered. Some have lost loved ones through COVID, others have faced serious economic ruin, business failures, mental and physical health issues, and some now have a real feeling of fear and trepidation for the future. As a county council, we must not only give these residents leadership, hope and encouragement, we must also provide more practical support on the ground to help deliver the help they need. Now, as has been said, our proposals are focused on targeting support to the following key areas. We want to turn the fine words of the Essex Climate Change Commission into action now, not sometime in the future. We want to offer far more support for the increasing numbers of children and young people with mental health issues by cutting waiting times for treatments and the isolation that they feel. We want to offer more support for Essex young people, particularly with mentoring and support for young carers and for more outreach work. We want to offer more support for low-income families, and we want to start clearing a massive backlog of footway, cycleway and drainage repairs. And we also want to reduce fly tipping. Now, our targeted support to some of the most vulnerable members of our community will mean Essex residents paying an extra 25 pence a week on a Band D property. We believe that many Essex residents would be prepared to pay that extra 25 pence if they know exactly where the extra money that's raised was being targeted, where it was going to. We have been open and transparent on how our measures would be funded, unlike the administration, whose budget has this £46 million unidentified cuts, and we believe Essex residents deserve better. Now, if I turn to the debate, can I start by thanking Councillor Spence for saying there'll be no cuts in adult social care. I'm sure members across the chambers will be delighted to hear that news. However, if that is the case, where are the cuts coming from? In terms of the comments raised by Councillor Bentley, he says the amendments are muddled. Our amendment is very, very clear. We say what the amendment is and how it's funded. I would refute something completely that Councillor Bentley has said. No member of the Liberal Democrat group have criticised the gritting teams that have done a brilliant job. So I don't know where he's got that from, but it's complete nonsense. In terms of what Councillor Gooding said, he mentioned about manicure and Hollybush with nail scissors. Well, I understand the point he's making, but try saying that to a young person who's waiting for mental health treatment and to the parents who are worried sick about what's going to happen to their young people. You know, these young people deserve far better.
Councillor Kendall, I think it's time to wind up.
Okay, finally, Chair, Councillor Walsh said that our amendment was an absurdity. Well, if it is an absurdity, I'm proud to go to Essex residents and say, here is £7 million of investment in the most vulnerable and needy people in our community, and this is how we pay for it. So that's our view. We stand by it and we're committed to it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Kendall. I would say I'm very pleased to see you here and looking well.
Thank you, Chair.
I'll now ask Councillor Julie Young, as seconder of the Labour amendment, again, 3 minutes. I have been quite generous occasionally, but 3 minutes, please.
You're always generous to me, Mr. Chairman. I start by thanking all officers for the work they do for the council and the people of Essex each and every year, and especially the finance officers at this time. Mr. Chairman, the Labour group always believes in good public services, always have and always will. And over the years, our group has been at the forefront of fighting the plethora of cuts Essex Tories have made to vital services. As a result of these cuts, disabled children get less respite care, library services have diminished, care homes closed, care charges risen, parents pay to get their children to school where once that were free, and young people are left unsupported by dwindling levels of youth provision. Let the people of Essex be warned, despite warm words about supporting the most vulnerable, in practice this simply hasn't happened. We're reminding Essex residents of your past performance, Councillor Moran, and especially on the library debacle. Councillor Spence, you sit on 391 million in reserves, yet expect vulnerable people to pay more in care charges. This can't be right. We have literally suffered 11 years of levelling down. Professor Marmot's report reveals the evidence. So I say to the people of Essex and the country, do not be fooled by this sudden talk of levelling up. We know that the Cabinet Member for Children emphatically celebrated the chance to cut benefits in 2010. So much support has been stripped away that small sums going to target holiday hunger is a sticking plaster applied to a very badly broken society. Post-COVID, I think the biggest impact will be on our youth, and we must invest in them with more and better provision. We have focused our amendments this year quite narrowly to really defined areas, and highways being one of these. We support all initiatives to get people walking slightly more. It's good for health and good for climate change. However, our roads and footpaths have suffered a decade of diminishing investment, and the cracks are there for all to see. People will use public rights of way and footpaths if they are better maintained. With more money, more work can be done. It's as simple as that. A year ago, almost to the day, Cabinet met and extended the Ringway Jacobs contract for another 5 years. On the day, I described my shame at the state of our roads, and I have to say, Mr. Chairman, that shame still persists. Ringway Jacobs got another 5 years on the job. I will hazard a guess that the majority of you in the chamber today get similar emails to me. Even if you get a repair done, the quality of work is poor, and 1 year on from the extension of contract, things appear to be getting worse and not better. So let's get an expert in to mark their homework. This is absolutely not about denigrating workers. It's about materials, criteria and KPIs. This is a jam today and a breadcrumbs tomorrow budget, Mr. Chairman. I commend the Labour amendments to you, modest in scale but important in principle, demonstrating our support to the most vulnerable, those isolated, lonely, our youth, and the most pressing issue we all face, Mr. Chairman, which is potholes.
Thank you, young, interesting analogies of holly bushes, nail clippers, bread, butter. Nonetheless, it's very good. That's now brings us towards the conclusion of the budget debate, where I ask Councillor Whitbread, Member for Fines, to make his speech in support of the budget motion. You have up to 10 minutes, Councillor Whitbread.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, if I can thank you for your excellent chairmanship over the past couple of years and how much I've enjoyed it. Starting today, I'd like to pay tribute to my finance team, led by Nicole Wood as our Section 151 officer, Stephanie Mitchener and Adrian Osborne, plus all the rest of the team who have worked tirelessly to prepare this budget that is before you today. And it's more than just working with myself. Of course, they work with all the cabinet members, and they work with the other councils as well, our partner councils across the county, to help them with the financial challenges that we've all faced from COVID-19. I've been a district councillor for 20 years, county councillor for 4 years. I have to say this is the most robust budget process I have ever been through, and that's why I'm so surprised today by some of the comments from the opposition. This budget has gone through scrutiny, it's gone through cabinet, back to scrutiny again, and all the savings were set out very, very clearly to the scrutiny panel. All I can say is the Liberal Democrat members of that panel must have been present but not engaged at the time. It is a real shocking indictment that they haven't read the papers, because the Section 151 officer's response to the budget is very clear. And this budget is a sound budget and the savings are all properly explained. As the leader has said, this is a budget focused on supporting families, green growth and supporting our Essex economy to survive and thrive, creating jobs and opportunities to learn new skills. The leader has spoken about the achievements that we've seen over the last 10 years. This includes keeping the growth of Essex County Council's tax bills below the average of other counties. Indeed, as we sit here today, it is probably likely that we may have the lowest council tax in the country from a county council perspective. Not the lowest council tax, the lowest council tax increase. And I would remind Councillor Henderson that during the tough times as we recovered from the last Labour government, this council froze council tax between 2011 and 2016 to help residents survive the post-Labour years. The budget strikes an appropriate balance between the needs of residents, the economy and the environment. We have only raised council tax bills by what is necessary, taking up just 1.5% of the social care precept. Every penny of the social care precept and more besides will go to funding critical services in adult social care to enable vulnerable residents to live dignified lives. The budget sets out an investment of an additional 33 million across portfolios for 21-22. The majority of this growth will protect and grow adult social care services, meeting the rise in demand for our services and levelling up through pay rises for carers. This budget represents an investment in people. We are creating 1,000 entry-level roles for young people across the county and in our own organisation. We're also creating 1,500 school places and improving support for people who have additional support needs by offering social care that is more localised, more preventative and more integrated with partners. The budget represents an ambitious investment in our economy. We're increasing our investment in major projects by 50% so we can build back better. This budget presents a capital plan of 1.3 billion. Yes, 1.3 billion to build the infrastructure, school places and homes we need to help us grow as we come out of this pandemic. The budget sets 1 million aside for the Working Families Programme, supporting families who are earning below the level required for a decent standard of living for a multi-agency partnership involving local, regional and community partners. The budget represents an ongoing investment in our commitment to climate change, planting more trees and investing in sustainable solutions for all our futures as we look to increase the opportunities for new green growth and jobs in these industries as we transform our own operations, public estate and ways of working. I'm really surprised that neither of the opposition's amendments make any mention of investment in our economy, in supporting residents to access new skills, or support for Essex businesses to recover from the recent economic shocks. I'm assuming this is because of the excellent partnership working that has been in place and led by Essex County Council, working with officers and politicians at all levels of local government, especially in the passporting out of national government support to businesses across Essex who need support, and to reshape our services to provide free business support across Essex. Furthermore, I can only assume that the lack of commentary in either proposal about how they would support the economy to recover, encourage residents to return to the high streets, and our residents to learn new skills and employment at a time of record unemployment is a ringing endorsement of the measures that we have put in place. I'm also shocked that rather than seeking to minimise the impact on our residents, the Liberal Democrats motion seeks to increase the tax burden for residents, asking them to pay an additional £7 million to fund their proposals. I'm the first to admit that setting this year's budget and identifying how we're going to address known gaps in our budget for 22-23 is a significant challenge. There will be difficult choices that we will have to make. But opposition members have highlighted that there are risks identified in the savings, and we need to make sure and have questioned our ability to deliver £46 million worth of trade savings. I would like to remind members that we have a strong track record of delivering savings year on year without cutting services. We do this by investing in new and more effective ways of working, as you've heard throughout the speeches this morning. Our transformation and services improvement reserves enables us to do this. It is by working smarter, more effectively and efficiently that we deliver savings. And to do this needs investment in our operations. However, despite challenging us on how we would deliver savings, opposition parties are suggesting that we reduce the amount we invest in the service transformation, putting these savings at increased risk and increasing the gap that we are required to close in 22-23. In conclusion, I feel that Essex County Council's budget is one which shows how confident we are in our officers and political leadership. We have clearly demonstrated that despite the extraordinary circumstances we find ourselves in, that we can deliver value for money, investment in our economy, investment in our residents, and support for those that need it. We are not cutting services, we are investing. We are not seeking to raise council tax across the board, we are working smarter. We are making prudent, careful choices, minimising the cost to our residents, whilst continuing to deliver excellent services. Chairman, I recommend this budget to you. This is a budget that sets us free from moves us forward from the pandemic. And as the leader said at the very beginning, we are looking to stride forward and build a better future for the residents and businesses of Essex. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Whitbread. Now, that's the end of the speakers. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give the leader of the council, Councillor David Finch, the opportunity to say some final words, if he so wishes, and I'm sure he will. I suspect Councillor Gilbert slightly jumped the gun, maybe, but there's no time limit. And David, it's an opportunity for you to say a few words at the end of the budget debate. This is where David isn't here.
People have tried to mute me before, Chairman. It's never worked. I just wanted to have a moment of reflection, first of all, because I think my group knows, as my cabinet knows, as the chief exec and the senior leadership team knows, I'm not standing for re-election in May. And I do that with some disappointment, to be honest, that I'm standing down, but I think it's right for me. But what I really wanted to do was actually just make a few comments, and I've heard them at different times in the process that we've been going through, thanking staff. And I won't actually comment on the opposition budgets because I think, well, they're in opposition, aren't they? And therefore they're bound to say what they want to say about us and the way that we've constructed as a group such a brilliant budget, such a brilliant proposal to take us forward. And indeed to recognise, and they must recognise, that the County Council is in such strong financial hands that it can steer its way through pretty much any catastrophe or crisis that is thrown at it. And indeed, we've proven that point with the pandemic as well. So I just wanted to make a couple of points. One was just remember in 2000 when the Liberal Democrat and Labour administration finally fell to the Conservatives, that we only had 1 week's money left in the bank and the district auditor was threatening, if you don't sort this budget out, I'm going to take special measures against you. You hear that now, 20 years later, being said about Croydon and others. But also the care homes that people talk about so passionately, the care homes that existed when we took over, there were 10 left. The rest had been sold off, and those 10 were in such a poor state, there was no other option but to sell them off. So I do want those of you that are new in the council to remember that, because it's very important to remember the history of those that talk about their passion for saving people, saving the underdog, saving the poor people. And actually what they do is not that at all. However, I want to move on, Chairman. I want to be positive. I want to say and pay tribute to the staff who've worked so hard over this last year, whether they're in finance, whether they're in adult social care, in highways certainly, or throughout the county council. I pay tribute to those staff and the work that they've done, not just on a routine basis, but dealing with a pandemic which has challenged us and challenged everyone, both in terms of working and in terms of our emotional and mental resilience as well. And we recognise that. And also I want to thank my cabinet colleagues. I've already thanked them privately once, but I do want to thank them because I think, you know, I couldn't wish for a better group of cabinet members, steeped in strong discipline in their service, understand what they've got to do, innovative and absolutely determined to deliver what's best for Essex as well. I would also just like to pay a compliment to the leaders of the opposition, believe it or not, just to say, when we were in that pandemic, it was good, it was right that we all worked together. And I do want to compliment the three leaders of the opposition in saying that we did work together. And we know that with Mike McCrory, in terms of him being leader of the opposition, many of the urgent decisions that we had to take about funding, we didn't have any arguments about it. Mike reviewed them and put them forward. So I want to thank them for that. And I also want to thank you, Chairman, because I think you have presided over the council meetings, I think it's for the last 3 years. And I think you've done that with such aplomb, such character, such good humour, when there are times when obviously you didn't feel good humoured at all, but nevertheless did it with such finesse. And I want to thank you. And as they say, you'll be a difficult act to follow, but you've certainly been a great act. So thank you, Chairman. That's really all I wanted to say. So thank you all.
Well, thank you, Councillor Finch, for that. And I think it's absolutely right that we should hear that summary. We'll now go on to the voting. After this, we can have a break. And in accordance with Standing Order 16.10.2. Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. I've just seen, Mike, you have your hand up. What?
Well, Chairman, I need your guidance here. I don't know whether there's going to be an opportunity to respond to Councillor Finch's announcement or not.
What I've intended to do, Mike, is at the end, towards the end of the meeting, I'll be summing up, because it's my last meeting anyway, I will welcome remarks to the consequences of this announcement. So, yes, and you are actually down on my list.
Thank you very much.
Right, we'll now move on to the voting. I do believe that our Chief Executive is here. So the amendments to the budget will be voted on using, the amendments will be voted on using the electronic voting system, which you've all used. And we'll put on, the first one obviously would be any amendments to the portfolio budgets that do not affect the precept or the local balances in the order in which they were moved. So therefore, that will be the Liberal Democrat group amendment and the Labour group amendment. So we now come down to the pressing of buttons. First, can I ask you to vote electronically on the Liberal Democrat amendment? And I will then ask verbally Councillor Aspinall and Councillor Spence.
Chairman, I'm struggling to find, I've lost the picture. And therefore,
I can do it on voice, David. If you'd like to vote by voice, I'm sure we can take it.
No, I'm voting on the Liberal Democrat amendment. I'm voting against.
Okay. And don't forget to press submit.
I did.
Not you, David. Anyone. And we'll wait a moment or two, and my amazing support officers here will give you a result.
I register my vote against, please, Chairman.
Thank you. And Councillor Aspinall?
Councillor Aspinall is for, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Aspinall. Voting stopping now.
Chairman, I've been told failed to submit poll error 100060000.
I think we can take you as a yes, as a for, Councillor McCrory, and I'm sure we'll manage to do that.
Thank you.
Chairman, it wouldn't work for me.
Oh, right, Councillor McEwen.
It's not working for me.
Okay,
well, I want to vote against.
You're going to vote against, right, Councillor? Against.
And Mr. Chairman, the same for me, and I would have voted
Councillor Lewis.
Oh
dear. Well, Paul and Joanna are taking these down. Thank you. Right, the result of that vote has come through, including those who've done it verbally, is 4-7 against 51 and abstain 11. So the amendment fails. I'll now ask you to vote electronically on the Labour amendment. But firstly, I'll ask Councillor Aspinall, have you cast your vote?
Councillor Aspinall for, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Aspinall. Councillor Spence?
Against.
Against. And are there any other people having problems?
Same thing again. Oh, same thing again for me, Chairman. I'm abstaining on this one.
You're abstaining. Councillor McCrory abstains. Councillor McEwen, you're muted, but I can see you trying to say something.
No, it worked for me this time.
It worked. Oh, jolly
Thank
good.
you, Chairman. Yeah, thank you.
It's the Mac effect. Is there anyone else who is having problems? The vote is closed. And the result is just coming through. Right, the result of the Labour amendment is 4-9 against 50, abstain 9, and therefore the amendment fails. The substantive motion then becomes a motion, and this has to be done by way of a named vote. So you will have to unmute. One or two if you forget, but nonetheless you have to. And I will ask our Chief Executive if he can conduct a named vote.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Just checking you can hear me clearly because I'm working with my
can
iPad.
and see you.
Yes.
You know, hard and rugged look you have.
Is that another part-timer? Oh, yes, it is.
A tricky morning trying to get in, but I'm here now. So as normal, please, members, I'll call you in alphabetical order. If you could indicate clearly with a for, against or abstain, I'd be very grateful. Councillor Abbott.
For.
Councillor Aldridge.
For.
Councillor Aspinall.
Councillor Aspinall against.
Councillor Baker.
Against.
Councillor Ball.
For.
Councillor Barker.
For.
Councillor Beavis.
For.
Councillor Bentley.
For.
Councillor Blackwell.
Abstain.
Councillor Brown.
For.
Councillor Buckley.
For.
Councillor Butland.
For.
Councillor Canning.
For.
Councillor Chandler.
For.
Councillor Channer.
For.
Councillor Davies.
Against.
Councillor Deakin. Councillor Deakin.
Sorry, I was muted. Against.
Thank you. Councillor Durham.
For.
Councillor Egan.
For.
Councillor Finch.
For.
Councillor Gadsby.
For.
Councillor Garnett.
For.
Councillor Goggin.
For.
Councillor Gooding.
For.
Councillor Grundy.
For.
Councillor Guglielmi.
For.
Councillor Hardware.
For.
Councillor Harris.
Against.
Councillor Henderson.
Against.
Councillor Henry.
For.
I'm sorry. Could you repeat that, Councillor Henry?
For. Can you hear me? For.
Thank you. Councillor Hillier.
For.
Councillor Honeywood. Councillor Honeywood. Councillor Honeywood.
For.
Councillor Jackson. Oh, I'm so sorry. Was that a four? Thank you. Councillor Jackson.
For.
Councillor Johnson.
Abstain.
Councillor Jowers. Councillor Kendall.
Against.
Councillor Lissamore.
For.
Councillor Lewis.
For.
Councillor Lumley.
For.
Councillor McCrory.
Against.
Councillor Madden.
For.
Councillor Maddox.
For.
Councillor Massey.
For.
Councillor McEwen.
For.
Councillor McKinley.
For.
Councillor Metcalfe.
For.
Councillor Mitchell.
For.
Councillor Moore.
For.
Councillor Moran.
For.
Councillor Platt.
For.
Councillor Pond.
For.
Councillor Pratt.
For.
Councillor Reeves.
For.
Councillor Reid.
Against.
Councillor Robinson.
Against.
Councillor Schmidt.
For.
Councillor Scordis.
Abstain.
Councillor Sheldon.
For.
Councillor Smith.
Against.
Councillor Suter.
For.
Councillor Spence.
For.
Councillor Stevenson.
For.
Councillor Steptoe.
For.
Councillor Turrell,
Against.
Councillor Wagland,
For.
Councillor Walsh,
For.
Councillor Weston,
For.
Councillor Whitbread,
For.
Councillor Wood, Councillor Wood, and Councillor Young.
Against.
Thank you, members.
Right, well, thank you, members. I've just lost it. Hold on. It's 52 for, 13 against, and 4 abstentions. So the budget motion is passed. Thank you all very much. We'll now take a 28-minute break. Makes it all very simple. We'll reconvene at 2 o'clock and hopefully we can rattle through much of the rest of the business of the day. So take a well-deserved break and I'll see you all back at 2 o'clock.
Magic.